Last week on this video, I recommended guys like Zach Moss, Nico Collins, Hunter Henry, and Jordan Love. Let's see if we can do it again on this week's video. Here are 8 players you can consider starting this week that I think actually have decent upside. If you haven't signed up for UnderdogFantasy.com yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's a ton of fun. Go there, use promo code ENDGAME. They will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And they have a special only for new customers. Lamar Jackson higher than half a yard this week. Take it, take the higher, pair him with any other line you like on their site, and you can triple your entry. UnderdogFantasy.com, use promo code ENDGAME, get that deposit match, take the money they give you, put it on the Lamar Jackson higher, and triple it right away. And let's start with Gus Edwards at home against the Colts. This isn't necessarily the best matchup, but it's also not a matchup that should scare you at all. But the big selling point for Gus Edwards this week is that Justice Hill, dealing with some kind of toe injury and not looking very good to play in week 3 here. And if Justice Hill isn't playing, the only running backs behind Gus Edwards are Melvin Gordon and Kenyon Drake, who they just signed off the street to the practice squad. These guys are like a combined 75 years old, haven't been relevant in years. This will be Gus Edwards getting the lion's share of the touches here. And look, Gus Edwards is a capable running back. Had 10 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown last week. He's a guy who can pick up chunks of yardage, will get carries around the goal line, has chances to score. And in this matchup at home against the Colts, who are probably going to be starting Gardner Minshew, you got to think game script will be well on his side. Gus Edwards could easily see over 15 carries in this game against a okay Colts rush defense. Has plenty of touchdown upside. There are quite a few running backs this week that I would start Gus Edwards over if I had him. I think Gus Edwards can be a top 24 running back in week 3. And then it must be backup week because I also like Tony Jones. Not as much as I like Gus Edwards, but in deeper leagues, if you need a running back, you're desperate, look at Tony Jones. I know it's easy to look at the game last week and say, well, Taysom Hill was their leading rusher. And sure, he was, but it was Tony Jones and Jamal Williams, and then Jamal Williams got hurt. They didn't have anybody else to turn to. Kendre Miller, the rookie, who I do like, will be active this week, making his first start, but we can't assume he's going to come in and take a bunch of carries. Tony Jones should be the guy here. Had 2 touchdowns last week, so we know he has the potential to get the goal line work. And in this matchup against Green Bay, a defense that is much better against the pass than the run, I think there's going to be chances here for Tony Jones to pick up big runs, have touchdown upside. This should be a fairly competitive, fairly high-scoring game. There should be opportunities for Tony Jones here. Again, I like Gus Edwards more if I had to choose between these two. But if you're in deeper leagues, you're desperate at running back, which, let's be real, a lot of us are right now. Look at Tony Jones. I think he has a nice game. Now on to wide receiver, and look, we are all over Jordan Addison. I've been talking him up all offseason. He's looked great, but don't sleep on KJ Osborne this week, because for as good as Addison has been, KJ Osborne is still technically the number 2 wide receiver. He's running more routes than Jordan Addison, and he's playing more snaps. And kind of like last week where he scored a touchdown, this is a matchup he can take advantage of because the Chargers are one of, if not the worst passing defense in the NFL right now. Not only are they giving up the most points to wide receivers right now, they're also allowing a league-high 9 yards per reception. Minnesota's at home in the Dome against this defense. This could be a huge week for all these pass catchers. I love Jordan Addison this week. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is going to smash. Kirk Cousins is going to go off. But don't sleep on KJ Osborne. If you're looking for a flex and you don't have anybody better, I think KJ Osborne comes through with a really nice game here in week 3. Plenty of upside for your fantasy lineups. I also really like Josh Reynolds this week. Through 2 games, he has 13 targets, 9 catches, 164 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's the clear number 2 wide receiver, really the clear number 2 target behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. Look, Amon-Ra St. Brown also dealing with some kind of toe injury. We haven't heard anything that makes me think he might not play this week, but if he's banged up or limited, that just is going to open up more opportunities for Josh Reynolds this week. And while the Falcons have been a pretty good defense this year, they don't scare me enough to make me back off of Josh Reynolds as a deeper league flex play. He's going to get the target volume. They're at home as well, which you know Jared Goff always plays way better at home. Last week at home, Jared Goff looked great. I think he'll look great again this week. Josh Reynolds, the number 2 target in this offense. The targets are there. The touchdown potential is there. He's got upside in your deeper leagues as a flex. Look at Josh Reynolds. I think he comes through. All right, let's move on to quarterback down. We've got some rookies playing well, but I really like CJ Stroud in week 3. He has attempted 91 passes through 2 games. He has not attempted less than 40 in either of the first 2 games. Reason being, number 1, this defense isn't very good, so game script often requires them to pass. But also, number two, this offensive line is beat up and they can't run the ball. That shouldn't change this week. They're going to need to pass it a ton. And Jacksonville, even though their defense has been better, they've given up the 6th most points in fantasy to quarterbacks. There will be chances here for CJ Stroud. He's likely going to have to throw the ball over 40 times again this week. Jacksonville at home, coming off a down game. You know they're going to bounce back. I expect Jacksonville's offense to have a great game this week. CJ Stroud going to be asked to throw the ball a ton, and he's got weapons. Nico Collins looks great. Tank Dell, the rookie. Robert Woods even looking pretty good. He's got weapons around him. He's not turning the ball over, which is also really nice. And he finally had a touchdown last week. In fact, he had 2 touchdowns last week. So I think CJ Stroud, if you're looking for a streaming quarterback, you don't have better options on the waiver wire, he'll get it done this week. One of my favorite streaming options, even in your 12-team 1QB leagues. And then I can't believe I'm saying it, but I also like Baker Mayfield as a streaming option. I can't lie. That was tough to say, but I gotta be real. He looks like a good streaming option. He's attempted 34 passes each of the first 2 games, and you might look at it and say, well, he's going up against Philadelphia. You can't start Baker Mayfield. But this isn't the Philadelphia defense we saw last year. Yes, they are still elite versus the run, but they have been terrible against the pass. They have given up at least 300 passing yards each of the first 2 games. And remember, in week 1, it wasn't some elite passing offense. It was Mac Jones and the Patriots. And they still gave up over 300 passing yards. They're banged up in this secondary. They're not as good as they were last year. There will be chances here. And Baker Mayfield has looked good, I guess. I have to say it. He just has at least looked good. I mean, he's putting up fantasy points. He's making plays. And the one thing I didn't think we'd see from Baker this year that we are seeing, he's not afraid to throw it down the field, take shots to Mike Evans. There will be chances here for Baker Mayfield. I still prefer CJ Stroud, but in like your 2QB Superflex leagues or maybe in your 16-team, 14-team leagues where there's not as many QBs out there, I think Baker Mayfield can have a top 15-ish type of week this week. So if you're desperate at quarterback, you need a streamer, and you're in a deeper league or a 2QB Superflex, look at Baker Mayfield. I think he comes through. And then finally on to tight end. I just talked about Baker Mayfield. Let's talk about his tight end, Cade Otton. I think people don't realize how much Cade Otton has actually been involved this year. He has 8 catches for 60 yards on 9 targets through 2 games. And you say, okay, 8 catches for 60 yards, big whoop. But he's a tight end. I mean, what are we expecting here? Like 100-yard games? 8 catches, 60 yards in 2 games is pretty good for a tight end that's just sitting on your waiver wire. And you got to really like him this week because he saw an uptick in targets and receptions last week, 6 targets and 4 catches last week. And now he gets the best matchup for tight ends. That's right, Philadelphia. Not only are they terrible against the pass, they're terrible against tight ends. They have allowed the most points to tight ends. Hunter Henry had a very nice game against them in week 1. Even Mike Gesicki had a nice game against them in week 1. We saw what TJ Hawkinson did to this defense in week 2. For whatever reason, they can't stop the pass and they can't stop tight ends. I don't think people realize it yet, but Philadelphia is a defense it looks like you want to stream tight ends against. Cade Otton is getting involved. He's a red zone threat. The targets are there. The yards are there. He has a pretty decent floor this week with decent upside. Looking for a tight end streamer, he's one of my favorites. As is Dalton Schultz this week, who quietly has 11 targets and has run the most routes of any tight end through 2 weeks. Now, granted, he hasn't done a lot with those targets yet, but he's had some chances. CJ Stroud has missed him on some potentially big plays. But any guy who's getting this kind of usage, this kind of route running, this kind of targets is eventually going to have a good game, and I think it could be this week against Jacksonville. I talked about it with CJ Stroud. I think this is going to be another game where they're going to have to throw 40-plus times in this one. They're going to be in catch-up mode. Their stud corner, Derek Stingley, looks like he's going to miss the game. Jacksonville should absolutely have no problem against this defense. And that means Dalton Schultz is probably going to run a ton of routes and get a bunch of targets again. CJ Stroud looks good. This connection is going to come through at some point. You got to just bank on it happening this week in another good matchup against Jacksonville, because Jacksonville has given up the 6th most points to tight ends through 2 games. So look at Dalton Schultz in your deeper leagues, or if you need a tight end streamer. I'd be shocked if he's not on every waiver wire right now, because he's really done nothing to start the season, but the underlying usage is there. Eventually it's going to come through, and I think it's this week against the Jaguars. Hey, if you want to see more great videos just like this to help you with your lineups and to dominate your week 3 matchup, check out this playlist right here.